You have a baby, a 6-month-old baby, born with a hole in the heart. The heart is the size of a piece of popcorn, and you're going to go in and operate. The only thing you've seen up to that point is a CT, a flat vision of tissue on a flat screen. So how are you going to tackle this hole in the heart? How are you going to patch it? We need to be able to see a person in 3D. We are 3D. Why don't we look at the images in 3D?
My guest today creates holograms for surgeons to help them operate more effectively. Her name is Alison Sundset, and she's the CEO of HoloCare. So based in Oslo in Norway, HoloCare basically is a software platform that works in VR and takes CTs, MRIs, creates 3D imagery and allows everyone in the MDT to plan their surgery by basically manipulating a 3D organ in virtual space. It's being used in Leeds Hospital in the UK. They've just got CE mark. They're getting FDA. There is all sorts going on with HoloCare that makes it practical. They're very clinically focused. It's regulated. It's incredibly cool. You can hear all about Alison's story in this episode, and you can hear about exactly what HoloCare are doing in liver surgery, in children's heart surgery, and what they're going to do in orthopedics and lots of different areas. So, this is a very cool episode. Hope you enjoy it. So, Alison, hello and welcome. This is long overdue. Welcome to the Healthtech Podcast. You and I have known each other for quite a while now. Obviously, a loyal and faithful client of SomX. It's very surprising it's taken you this long to come on the podcast, but of course, you're doing fascinating and wonderful things with virtual reality and surgery, and looking to do some very exciting things in the very near future. So a very good time to bring you on, I think. So welcome. How are you doing? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I apologize it's taken so long to be able to do this. I have a great pleasure in working with you in the team, and you have a fantastic team. So we really appreciate all the work that you've done on our journey as well. So over the last couple of years. So thanks.
Oh, it's very kind. It's very kind. Thank you. Alison, whereabouts are you speaking to us from today? Because I know the answer to this is quite exciting.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm in Oslo in Norway, a Yorkshire girl who crossed the ocean to be with a Norwegian surgeon who refused to stay in London. So I've been here now for 32 years, actually.
Wow.
I have some international jobs behind me, but my life is in Oslo. So I've become a transformed Viking.
Beautiful. How are you with the language? The language is quite a difficult one to pick up, right?
Yeah. Well, it's difficult to pick up. I work in healthcare, health tech, so the majority of the language is in English. The passion for Norwegians to speak in English is very strong. So if you do try, they do tend to move you back. So I can end up in conversations where I'm speaking Norwegian, they're answering English. So it's like bizarre.
But very respectful of each other's
Yes, of course.
heritage, I guess, which is really nice. Yeah. And having been to Scandinavia a couple of times, like they can certainly speak the Queen's English better than the King's English, I should say now, but quite a lot better than quite a lot of people in England, including myself. So, fair play. Alison, listen, obviously, you're doing incredible things with HoloCare, but you've got a wonderful career that sort of leads you up to HoloCare and everything that you're doing. So, yes. Often on this podcast, we talk about people's stories. So, why don't you tell us the long version? How does one go from a Yorkshire girl to a CEO of a Norwegian health tech company? Tell us a bit of your story.
That's a long one. Okay, so I was born and bred in Yorkshire, so made in Yorkshire. Grew up in Ilkley. My actual passion was to work in forensic science. So I had this weird very weird passion for the prison service, forensics, and so that was my first port of call. I'm afraid I had my parents were not keen with the prison service side of things, so I was more towards the science. So I ended up in Leeds University. I have a background in clinical biochemistry. And during the vacation period, I worked in pathology as well, so I could have both passions, which obviously fed into each other, which was really nice. So then I worked for a while at Bradford Royal Infirmary as a medical technician. I managed to scrape through my my degree. I'm very sporty, so it was a combination of trying to keep the sports piece under wrap and focus. And I have a awful, quite limited. Yeah, it was very debilitating at the time. Dyslexia. So studying was a problem, and of course, when I'm born in the 60s, it wasn't quite recognized. Yeah, so it was a challenge for me through that period. So we overcame quite a lot of obstacles there. I did a master's and a PhD, which tells a lot that you can, as a dyslexic, you can make it. And then I moved down to London to take up a position with Professor Jakub's team. Most of you probably heard of him. He was a famous cardiac transplant surgeon. Wow. So I ended up working in his team in hematology, looking at the challenges around transplanting a heart. So it was an incredible adventure. I was lucky to get into the team. I stood there for at least, I think, probably about 3 years. And in that period, I met a lot of international surgeons. And then suddenly a lung surgeon came from Norway to work a little bit in the team. And that was that story. So then I ended up moving across. We met. This is a kind of a whirlwind romance, I guess. It probably doesn't happen so much anymore. But I met in the operating theatre with a mask, and I didn't know each other outside.
Just the eyes, etc. That was enough.
Exactly. Yeah. I had moved to Norway by September, so it was a very short period of time, and married the following February. So I think the story of how we actually came, like we contacted as well, because obviously you just have eye contact in the theatre, was the Professor Jakub was operating, and I was working at the side of a perfusion pump. So in those days, the patient was elevated and the perfusionists were lower down, and of course you had this big baggy clothing on, and I was new as well to the theatre area. So so I was leaning over the pump, and he just turned around and he said, "Alison, you are distracting my surgeons. In the future, please wear underwear."
Oh, brilliant!
So that was that's how we came to connect, at least. So it's a nice story. Yeah.
And so, what did you do? What did you do in Norway once you were there?
Yeah, that was the next problem. So I have a very strange this background that doesn't exist in Norwegian education. So I had to redo parts of my master. They didn't accept the education in the 80s. So I did. I kind of had to reinvent myself as well. So I went back actually to work in what is now Access Shield. It was Nycomed at the time. So I went back and worked on the bench. So I went back to basic science and developed. Worked in the development of the NICO card, which was a rapid testing of sepsis in the body. So I worked on that for probably about 4 years. And then I was introduced to my actual very first startup. So I was in a company which worked in trying to identify a way of early markers, a way of detecting cancer in the colon. So which was quite interesting. So, but at that time I hadn't enough experience. I actually declined that that job, and I just carried on wanting to get more experience in the commercial side, because I've gone from bench top. So I decided that that I would carry on commercially. So I went to work with Pharmacia, which was bought up by Pfizer. So I worked in a sales job. I got to understand the whole of the Nordics, how it worked, the culture and everything, by traveling, which was a really nice way of getting around and understanding where you would move to. And then I started working in another department within that company, which made me travel quite a lot to Germany. So I had quite a lot of background then in commercial sales and how small teams functioned in a larger European team, which was very helpful for how I progressed in the future. Yeah, so from there I decided I was actually called back to work at this little startup with the colon cancer. They pulled me back in, which was nice, as the CEO. So worked there for 1.5 years, building up from absolutely nothing to having Philips. So the big Philips, electronic Philips from the Netherlands, they had an incubator in healthcare. And one of the general managers had heard about the company and came over and wanted to license some of the technology. Long story short, that didn't work out. But then I was headhunted to a job to start up in the incubator in the Netherlands. So then my career changed. So we brought in a new CEO in there. I stayed in contact with the company. It's doing really well today. And I started working between Amsterdam and Boston in the US, building up it was very fun, actually. A home diagnostic company within an incubator, which was an incredible opportunity Philips offered. And there was where I understood that my drive was very much about the passion and the focus on the patients, and making sure that the value proposition always had the patient was always the forefront of any proposition that we created from there on. So obviously we were going into the home of patients who are critically ill. They had cancer, on chemotherapy, and we were trying to make it so that their chemotherapy journey stayed on track by simple finger pricking diagnostics in the home with a communication link to the hospital. Because as a cancer patient, the last place you want to be is in a hospital where they have all the infections and health risks. So that was our way forward. Unfortunately for that particular division in Philips, with all the crisis and the kind of financial constraints, they decided to close the incubator. So then I had to once again reinvent myself back in Oslo. So then I went to another startup. There's a big incubator, and we're very privileged here that there's quite a large innovation drive in Oslo. There's an incubator, so I went back to the incubator, and I actually got another CEO job in a early startup. That was about 5 years ago now. And that company was more focused on the research side. They wanted to carry on researching and rather than the commercial side, so actually getting something out. So they had a 10-year focus on like continuing the development of a product, and that wasn't really where I wanted to be. And then 2 weeks into the awful pandemic 2020, I was headhunted to a job, which was where I am today, which is probably the best job I've ever had. I can be very open here. I'm 55 years old, so you appreciate I've had quite a long career here. So I was a headhunter from the UK, and I couldn't believe it when he said, no, Alison, the job's in Oslo. It's like, okay. And it just got more and more exciting. So I got down to the last three, and it was like, is this for real? Yeah. All the interviews were done on Teams, so I never met anybody, which in itself was unique. I'm really a people person, so it was like suddenly you have, you couldn't really get across yourself as a person or who you were on Teams, because at that time it was new. Of course, now we're all used to it, but then it was like, we just used like very basic tools. Up to that point, no one had ever heard of Teams so everything was done on webinars and interviews on telephones, and meeting the board on the phone was interesting in itself. Long story short, so I got the job, and then the fun started. So you join as a CEO in a company which really doesn't exist, because it's just based on a consultants from a big consultancy giant, which was Soprasteria. The family-based company, incredible company based in Paris. They have offices, quite large offices here in Norway and also Scandinavia. That was my journey. So I hit software never done before, as medical grade software. So software as a service, and looking at holographics in surgery. And so Then I am on 2D, working in a 3D world with people I never met, who were spread from Poland, Sweden, UK.
Wow.
It was incredible start. So those skills, I had to learn very quick, new skills as well.
Wow.
So,
What a story. There's so much, there's a lot that I want to talk to you about here, about your background, because I think for a lot of people, you have had a kind of a dream career to sort of get into health tech. And what I mean by that is you did the science bit. Now, people do that either through clinical or they do that through lab and bench and whatever, but they'll do the science bit and then they want to be in business. They want to be a leader. They want to be in health tech. They want to be doing strategy. They want to be doing these things. I think a lot of people say this stuff and struggle to know how to actually achieve it. But looking at your kind of blueprint, you seem to choose very deliberately sales and commercial. You went from science, and it's like, if you could pick, a part of a business that is literally the polar opposite of the sort of socialist nature of healthcare, you probably would pick sales and commercial, which really does give you the flip side of the coin. And it's completely different skill sets. It's completely different knowledge. It's completely different experience. And it seems like from your story that pretty much that just rounded you off incredibly quickly to become this sort of startup, not only generalist, but startups leader. And I think that also talks to perhaps like the personality that you have in your leadership credentials sort of naturally, that you gravitated more with that skill set to then CEO pretty much straight away. But, the startup then got in touch with you and was like, come join us, come be a leader, come be CEO, etc. So you've had sort of a dream start to, or say start to your career, but, a dream career up until that point. And then this being this kind of career CEO almost beyond that, being brought in and you're headhunted quite a lot from the sounds of things. Like you from your position and who you are and what you've managed to amass, like you're brought into a lot of these companies to do these things. I think incubators has played a big journey as well in your career from the sounds of it. You joined a lot of incubators. I think incubators are really interesting because you see lots of things. You see lots of different companies. You sort of get in the mindset of being able to help lots of different things. You're not pigeonholed into one place, which means that in your journey, for example, you can be a leader or you can be in a home diagnostic company and start a home diagnostic company at the same time. You can then start doing holographics for surgery because you do have a wider skill set because you haven't pigeonholed early. I think it's quite an interesting way that you put this all together. So my question here is this by luck or design? Like, did you think about that when you were, I'm thinking of the people listening that are in the science part. They've done their undergrad, master's, PhD. They've, looked at a bit of tech transfer or, commercializing academia, or indeed they've just got an idea and they're a clinician. Did you think very deliberately about, I'm now going to pick sales and commercial? Or did this just all sort of unravel for you? Like, talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. From okay, so from the bench top side, so working actually on the bench again with product design, I was lucky. Again, I was lucky in the fact that at the site, it was all in one place. So marketing, sales,
Right.
it was all in one building. Quite often, they pulled the benchtop engineers. They pull them in to help them create, the brochures, the publicity, the
Ah,
marketing. That
interesting.
you had that possibility at those times, yeah. So I got quite interested in it because I thought that was quite nice that they pull you in. And obviously, I was talking at very, like really, really detailed level. And they said, "No, Alison, can you talk to me as if I'm 15?" Yeah, so talk to me as if I'm a 15-year-old trying to sell this. Yeah, so and I thought it was quite interesting then. So obviously this passion kind of evolved from that, and then it was like how it's quite interesting how you actually sell something that you have designed and you're so passionate about the design of. How do you actually sell it to say, okay, it's pink and it's round for this reason? Do you appreciate that? Yeah, it's this. It was that kind of thing that I thought was kind of nice to be part of the sales team. So I didn't choose to go into the sales thing. I wanted to be part of them. So I went out quite often on trade shows and I thought it was quite interesting. They liked having the scientists with them. So that was
Yeah.
also good. It was good for them. And then I just like, it kind of like evolved from that I really wished to be part of a sales team. So then I just moved over. So it came to product management. Yeah.
Was sales something that you were naturally good at, or is that something that you learned?
Yeah. Yeah. Surprisingly. Yeah.
Oh, you were
I was,
naturally good at it.
yeah, it was like, I think I have like a people skill that was like, yeah, yeah, I like working with people, and I think that's kind of nice when you can sit down and sell. So it's the old-fashioned kind of selling when you you were together with a person and you could have time to sit with them. I'm not sure if in this day and age that it's so easy to do that anymore because of the people traveling and as we've said, the pandemic perhaps changed things as well. It's a different skill set that you need. But yeah, I liked it from C-suite down to end users. It's fun, yeah.
It's really nice. Why do you think you were headhunted so much? What put you in the shop window enough to be headhunted so much? I mean, for example, like, do you take care of like are you big on LinkedIn? Like, do you have like a big presence? Were you constantly putting yourself out there? Like, what is it, do you think? Was it the types of roles that you were in? Like, what do you think led to you being headhunted so much?
Yeah, so if you go back to the incubators as well, Norway is a beautiful but very small country. So I think that there's not very many of us with such a broad background. I have everything from, like from the compliance, the regulatory
Yeah,
structure.
okay.
I think there's not so
Got you.
many of us that have that diversity. Yeah, so you get picked up quite quickly, and the incubators promote. There's a network, so there's a network for these different things. Yeah, and it's
Got you.
yeah, a small country helps, I guess.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I did a podcast recently with a guy called Benjamin. He's a not orthopedic. He's an obs and gynae consultant, and he's sort of like a career chief medical officer. And in the same way that sort of being a career CEO, career CMO, and he was talking about that when you want to be like a career CMO, you've got to break it down and consider like what's a CMO. You can be a CMO in a few different ways, and actually, it's about becoming the CMO, knowing and understanding deeply certain things that give you value. So, for example, he talked about regulatory and compliance being one of them. Perhaps it's commercial, perhaps it's network, perhaps it's product, like whatever it is, but you've got to know deeply. So it's interesting to me that it's the same sort of thing for CEO, seemingly, that actually that breadth across multiple things, but actually, I suppose also to know it deeply. I think that's where your expertise comes in, because you don't just know the science, you know it deeply. You don't just know the regulation, you actually know it deeply. And I think being quite for people listening that perhaps want to aim at CEO, I think it's about identifying what those broad buckets are, because sales and commercial is a massive one of those. In medical
Yes,
devices, of
absolutely.
course, it's going to be regulation and compliance, whether that's software or hardware, and all these different buckets, right? It's going to be really important to learn those things deeply, which it sounds like you did.
Yeah. I think also, James, it's really important to understand your limitations as well, where you have your strengths and your weaknesses. Yeah. So like my worst nightmare is, even as a CEO, is sitting down with an Excel spreadsheet, trying to plan out that kills my passion. So that's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. I think when you've worked as long as I have, and you have this broader network, you know your limitations and you know where to reach out and when to reach out. And I think that's really important, so that you're not sort of spending hours and hours wading through a spreadsheet that, you're not going to get there any quicker than if you just reach out and say, can you help me with this? I think that's really important, is to know when to reach out and keep that network. And I think in this arena, I think it's really important to understand that it's so small that you really cannot mess up. You have to keep you have to be loyal. You have to be, this is really important, I think, here.
Yes.
You keep your network.
Indeed.
Close.
And you and I have talked about integrity very recently as well. And it is that as well. I think the self-awareness, knowing who you are, knowing what you're good at, and also knowing and being able to say to those headhunters, for example, yeah, I'm good for about 80% of this job description, but actually, if you're going to hire me into this role, I need a finance number two. Like, end of story. End of story. I need a finance number two who's going to be strategic. I can't have a finance person that's admin. I need someone finance that's going to be strategic, because that is a nightmare. But if you give me that, the other 80% of this, I'm going to absolutely nail. Like, that's a conversation full of integrity and self-awareness, and actually shows that future employer, like, okay, I actually believe them. They've identified their weaknesses. They've said where they need help, and actually they've said they're going to really deliver on the rest of it. I'm inclined to believe them, perhaps, rather than someone that comes in and says they can do everything and sort of fake it till you make it vibe. Doesn't really work at the senior level, that sort of stuff. No. You might be able to get away with more of that at more junior level, but
yeah. I was just thinking about also when it comes to like finance and things. We mentioned earlier about like dyslexic, and also everyone thinks that dyslexia it is at a place which is just in communication, written communication, verbal communication, but also numbers is also a big thing. So people don't think about the spreadsheets for dyslexic. That's also a challenge. Yeah, so I think this is why I'm so open on that topic, that I really do need a strategic CFO.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, I want to talk about HoloCare now. So when you say words like holographic and surgical and VR and all these things, it's incredibly exciting. It's incredibly exciting for kind of, I guess, even like the general public when they think about health tech. These are the sorts of things that the general public might think health tech actually are. They don't really realize that a lot of health tech is quite dull interoperability stuff in the background. It's actually trying to change infrastructure. Exactly. All these phrases are absolutely terrible. Yeah. So it's a delight to actually have someone that's doing like VR holograms for surgery on, where we can actually get into some exciting stuff. So tell me about HoloCare. So you're not the founder of HoloCare, you're the CEO of HoloCare. So that's quite interesting to talk about, like how you were brought in. You mentioned it very briefly in your introduction, but how you were brought into HoloCare, what the company actually consisted of at the point that you were brought in, what you were asked to do, building an initial team, the product, all that sort of stuff. Tell us about kind of your start into HoloCare and the early days of HoloCare.
Yeah. Okay. So we have to go back to 2016, when the Sopra Steria consulting house we mentioned earlier went to Microsoft, invited to a trip to the US, brought back a HoloLens, a headset, VR headset, which at that time was brand spanking new, first one in Europe, and they work in many industries: oil, gas, military. And they took, luckily for our HoloCare, they took a HoloLens to the incubators equivalent in Oslo University Hospital. And two of the surgeons, the head of surgery, stood up, and one was working in cardiac and the other in hepatology, so liver surgery. So, was very interested, and they thought they could do something within surgery. And in that time, they talked about communication. So, like how they could communicate between hospitals, they could communicate on how to operate. So it became like more focused about communication tool, which was fine. So this carried on from 2016 to 2019. So Prosteria kept wouldn't use the word playing, but exploring options. They got a large government grant from Norwegian Research Council. It's government based for 4 years, and this involved the liver surgery and pediatric cardiac surgery. So those two projects became moved forward with this grant. They realized that in December 2019 that they were going to have to form a company. So they did a spin-out company from Prosteria, where the innovators, which at this time obviously is a classic founder, is the two clinicians. They have a business venture which is called Inventu, and they formed part of this company. So they put two tranches of money in, really early startup money, and the company was formed. And then beginning of 2020, they started looking at contracts and pulling people in. So in actual fact, Birmingham Hospital was one of the discussions around having a contract around this communication device, which of course, as it's moved further on, they found out that actually it was a medical device, because it was but it was part of decision-making policies within the hospital. And of course, Prosteria, they don't do medical devices at all. So they decided that they would have to find somebody that could take over the role of a CEO to make this happen if they were serious. And that's when they brought in a headhunter. They went quite broad to look for someone, so they really meant it. So they brought in a UK headhunter, and I was picked up in that process. So that was my start there. So I never recall my first day when I first started. And of course, they wanted to show everything that they had done. They didn't know anything about medical devices, so I felt like I got a big box, of helium balloons, and I opened the box, and this all of these balloons came out with these strings that I tried to get hold of a few of them, and it was just like, what have they done? And there was media everywhere about they were going to reshape the world using this device, and it's revolutionizing healthcare, saving lives, all the claims that medical device companies just do not say. So we had to start pulling everything,
putting the genies
out
back
the
in the
social
bottles,
media,
etc. Yes.
Yes, yeah. So we learned that quite quickly, and then of course, I had to really carve out what we wanted to do. So our decision making was obviously based on following the money at that time. So we had to follow the journey of the liver surgery, which is what I did. Yeah, at that time. Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions on this, but before I do, could you just explain the product itself and the kind of example use case of how it's used practically?
So we take the cardiac case, because that's a more emotional story. So you have a baby, a 6-month-old baby, born with a hole in the heart. The heart is the size of a piece of popcorn, and you're going to go in and operate. So first of all, you have to reassure the parents that this is going to go fine. You have no choice, otherwise the child is not going to survive. So you have the task of how to plan that surgery. Heart, as all organs in the body, is unique to that person. So not one heart looks the same. And especially when it's it's a congenital heart failure, everything looks different once you operate. So if you're picturing this piece of popcorn as a heart, you're opening up a chest of a 6-month-old baby, and you're going to start operating. The only thing you've seen up to that point is a CT, which is in layman terms, it's looking like an X-ray. So it's a flat vision of tissue on a flat screen. So it's black and white on a flat screen. And it's like an apple cut into many layers, and you're trying to put that apple to look like a heart. So it's like cut, slice, and you're trying to make sense of the slices and where the problem actually lays. So you have surgeons sat around, you have radiologists sat around, multidisciplinary teams, the anaesthetists, and to some extent, in these cases, the parents of the child. So how are you going to tackle this hole in the heart? How are you going to patch it? So what we thought the solution is that we need to be able to see a person in 3D. We are 3D. Why don't we look at the images in 3D? But in this case, the organ is the size of a piece of popcorn. So how do you look at this tiny piece? Current care is to print it out. So it doesn't really matter. You can print it as big as you want. You can't look inside of it. It's a piece of plastic. Yeah. Once you cut inside it, you've done. You can't do anything with it. Yeah. And of course, the printing is really expensive, and to recreate these flat, images on the board, how do you make them 3D? So the HoloCare solution is we magically, using our software, create a 3D image. So we take all of these we can call them photographs. We take all the photographs, put them into one, recreate a model, a 3D model in the software, and then that is pulled to a device which displays either on 2D. If you wish to see it on 2D, you can still look 2D and spin it round. But the biggest part of our product is actually be able to see this in 3D. So you have the organ in 3D. You can pull it up as big as you want, using the HoloLens that we mentioned earlier in this journey, HoloCare journey. So it's a VR headset placed on. Everyone can talk together. Everyone sees the same space, the same organ. They can put markers in it, so you can show very clearly where you want to cut, where you want to put the patch on to seal the hole in the heart. And everyone is on the same page, and it's 3D as it will be when you open the baby's chest. Yeah. The additional function when you're in like hospitals and you're in cases of where it's seldom, it's luckily that this hole in the heart is not a common occurrence, and that you can also have expertise from other hospitals. So I can have another surgeon sharing the same headset, being involved in the case as well, so giving their opinions. So it's a little bit like, it's a little Star Wars experience. So if you go back to the early Star Wars days, it's like transporting this 3D person through space. It was a bit like that feeling. So very, very unique. So I think the story of I think that when you have a tiny heart, I think there you can see immediately the value of a 3D graphic in front of you, and it floats in front of you, and you're immersed in it. And
it's very easy to understand the value proposition that, of course, if you're making decisions, recreating 2D image CT, scrolling up and down and trying to recreate that image in your mind, if that's what you're doing anyway, and the error built into that by literally converting it into 3D and making decisions, add in the communication that you can now have with your team and all the rest of it, you're talking about an increase in quality. An increase in quality reduces complication rates. Reduce complication rates, you can produce a business model, all the rest of it. So yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I'm interested in when you initially, opened the box of helium balloons, which started flying out everywhere. I'm really interested in what were you thinking at that point in terms of, were you thinking, I need to find a business model here, I need to find a value proposition, I need to change the product, I need to, what were your questions? What were what were you worried about? Or what were you thinking, okay, I need to work on this at this point? What were your initial impressions of it? And I guess the reason that I ask is because there's a thing here around okay, it's VR, it's demonstrated, it's turning something into 3D in front of everyone. Is this a gimmick or does this have utility? And actually the utility bit of it, I think, is an interesting question because of the clinician founding of it, actually. I think that's quite interesting here, because I remember when I first started talking to you guys, the question on my mind is what's the utility? End of the day, is this practically useful? And I think Well, and in some ways, like I know the clinicians that you work with and things to make it useful. I think it's probably worth touching on that. But yeah, when you were opening that box of balloons and seeing, all of the product demos and everything that it can do and all these things, what were your questions? And yeah, was utility something on your mind?
So my initial, was with the box open, I was thinking, God, I'm going to have to disappoint a lot of people here, because I knew that there was no way that I could follow up with all these clinicians in a startup. So I had everything from child psychiatry to robotics. So you can't believe what was in that box.
Potential use cases. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I knew at this point there was so much passion, there was so much commercial drive, there was so much press around HoloCare, that I knew that at some point I'm going to have to, pull the plug on quite a lot of these cases.
Focus. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So that was number one. My second worry was it's fairly new. I've worked most of my life in healthcare. My worry was the adoption rate. So translated to sales cycles. How long is it going to get this into the clinical pathways? Because adoption to clinical pathways in the traditional healthcare is in itself a challenge. What's the hurdles? Hurdles to adoption, big challenge. My worry was it was going to be a surgical tool. How do you say it? Like a toy in a surgical toolbox. If you can imagine, it was just like something nice to have. Yeah, and then also the adoption of, would it be plugged in? Would people charge it? It was a worry at first.
Oh, interesting. Very practical. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so it was my faith in it was always the tagline that I've used right from the beginning. This was made by clinicians for clinicians. So that was something that I had in the back of my mind the whole time. They wouldn't have gone on this journey. They wouldn't have done this as far as they've come. They wouldn't have done as much investment of their own time in this if they didn't feel it really was. I was lucky in the hepatology case, or the liver case, that I was working with a leading surgeon, a well-known, renowned surgeon from Little Oslo, but he was had made a big name in the US and in Europe. That really helped me. So I stuck and latched onto him and his network. So we did a lot of work with him and understanding this value proposition early. So then I think that at that point I realized that we had to do it piece by piece, because at this stage they were talking about having it attached to robots in surgery, in the surgery straight away. So then with the regulatory side of things, which is obviously the thing that everyone calls the innovation barrier.
Stifler, yeah.
But, it enhances, we have to follow it, and that's how Absolutely. It is. So I broke it up into small pieces. So the first focus was on pre-operative, so nowhere near the operating room. So in an office, pre-operative planning of a surgery. So what's called a multidisciplinary team meeting, that we use this device, this communication, to plan the surgery. So it wasn't going into the green theatre area at all. So that was that. So I thought it was the best way to break it. And that was also where we could get some of these earlier kind of early adoption. I thought would be much easier to get it into clinical pathway as well.
Also, Alison, if I could just jump in, I can remember right going to MDT meetings or having in my little book at university as a medical student, just having to tick. I had to go to so many MDT meetings and tick them off, and it was just oh my God, I've got to sit in this 4-hour full half day meeting where everyone's ASA 2 and I was oh my God, this is so unbelievably dull. If I knew I was going to stick a HoloLens on and manipulate an organ in 3D and talk about surgical techniques and exactly how we're going to resect this, and I'm watching this in 3D, I know it's not a commercial value proposition. However, medical student attendance at these meetings would absolutely fly through the roof, and but maybe there's something in that as well. Also, just it does energize people as well. It's actually interesting. I know, and again, I know this is not the true utility of this tool to dumb it down, but my goodness, it makes healthcare cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Absolutely. And also part of the value proposition is the education, because you think about, I talked to
yeah,
earlier about the adoption. The adoption is not from, the heads of department, the
you're
60,
right.
65 plus. The adoption of this is coming from medical students, that they are the
You're right.
ones who sees the value. The younger innovators, they see the value. They want
Yes.
to adopt this. So it's like it's going to be a push up from both up and down. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
both
I
directions.
think
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
the education piece is really important here as well. And I
Mm,
think also in the early days when we try to, you can't put a medical device, you're not allowed to leave a medical device in a hospital. But the way we were trying to do it was like, could we use retrospective cases, so cases that already have been operated? Would a medical student have done something different? Would the head of department done something different? Which is how we kept going through the dark years of the pandemic when we couldn't get out. We were taking in retrospective cases and saying, okay, would you have done something different? Which obviously brought into both the head of department and the medical students. Yeah. So that was our
it's
way
very
through.
engaging. Yeah, that's really That's really interesting. Like as a stream of work to sort of get engagement from
Yeah.
all of those different levels. Yeah, just getting people
Yeah.
to review those cases. Would you have done anything? That
Yeah.
very clever. And actually, you talk about those
Yeah.
dark years
Yeah.
of the pandemic. We all had to be quite innovative in what on earth we were all doing at that point. And so, yeah, as you say, trying to sell a 3D object in 2D space is not the easiest. So no, that does sound very interesting. So yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying you started in yes, preoperative MDTs is where you started. Where did you go from there?
Yeah. Yeah, so we decided to stick there, because then I in the first round with this, I was thinking, how do I become attractive? How does the board and in HoloCare like have this trust in the pathway forward? How do we get some early wins? So instead of like going for what we call the full Monty and having the device in the operating theatre throughout the surgical pathway, that was going to take time. So I thought, to get some early wins, low hanging fruit, let's just stick to the preoperative planning, maybe a little bit easier to control through the regulatory pathway. So
Yeah.
at the same time as I joined and the pandemic started, they also changed the route to market in the regulatory pathway.
Yes.
Changed also from a directive to a regulatory path. So that was also new to everybody. So I had also that to tackle. Worried about that journey, I decided to do both a CE mark journey and an FDA, so that's the US approval route, at the same time, to do it parallel. And whatever hit first, that was our market we were going to go to.
That's a very startup mentality. Rather than spending 50K
Yeah.
or giving McKinsey 150K to give you a market report of where to land first. Yes. We'll tick the boxes and
We
see
had to
which
go
one
with the
gets ticked
regulatory.
first. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll convince
Yeah,
ourselves that was the
exactly.
right one.
But yeah, but what's the advantage of doing the FDA is that you can have actually meetings with the agency, the
100%.
FDA, the Food and Drug.
100%.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it has huge advantages. So they could guide you a little bit, and they agreed with this journey to do the preoperative first, find a device which was equivalent, which there is not many. So that was a first challenge, but we managed to find something similar, and they accepted that. So that was our first way, and then we just focused and we just rode two horses, so to speak, and landed one. So long story short, we managed to at the end of 2023, we managed to certify the company as a medical device company. So
Brilliant.
an ISO 13485, which was no that was a tough road. And the new MDR, we managed to comply to that, and we got a CE and CA, so the CA for the UK market. So we landed all that last year.
Wow.
Which was in fact an actual record for a medical device company in the UK to actually push it through that fast. So we used a lot of energy, a lot of focus, and a lot of money to push this through to get it to where we are. So we have now certified our platform. So this is the platform where the imaging goes in and pushes out, and also the clinical application, which our first one was the liver. So we're focusing on cancer of the liver is our first application. Mm-hmm.
This is incredible. So obviously, it's really interesting to me that obviously you came in and it was this. I almost picture it. You talk about horses. I've been using a lot of horse analogies recently, or hearing them. But anyway, this sort of like bucking, excitable horse that, super strong, super powerful, and you just need to get it to somehow just focus and run a race in a straight line. And it seems like that's what you did initially. You sort of tried to tame this beast and figure out all this opportunity, all the things it could do. Like, actually, we just need to focus and set it down this running track, which is what the initial job was. And it's now actually run quite a lot of that track, and it's gone through its first checkpoint. And now it's interesting because now it's got a few different directions this thing can go, because you can be sold, you can be bought, you can be commissioned, you can be procured, whatever the right word is, which obviously becomes incredibly exciting. And obviously BBC picking up that it's being used in Leeds, and this is interesting now, right? Like, this is a very interesting inflection point for this, because this is going to be used in the real world. You're going to get more data of its usage. You're going to figure out, we're going to go deeper on the value propositions and all these different things. So in terms of where you're at now, I mean, talk to me about Leeds. Leeds is interesting, so we can definitely talk about that. And I guess like what you're looking to do now beyond that, and where this goes, like what the scale of this becomes, and I'm interested because there's so much exciting stuff that could happen, I guess, from here.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's very funny that you mentioned about horses. So in the company, we use the America Cup. So we're all on a sailing boat with all of its journeys and wind and no wind and compass. And,
my God, I did a podcast recently with Emil Hewage from a company called BIOS, and he's literally just learned to sail. So literally we spent like an hour and a half, like with all these different sailing analogies of having the wind in your sails and tacking into the wind, and then stormy seas. And oh my God, it was just like one metaphor after another. All in the same boat. 100%. Yeah. Funny.
It was great. I used it. We used it just now on to make a team meeting to get the team over. But anyway, so now what I have to do to the company, we've been obviously R&D focused. So we have we had a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the year, which was called Code to Customer. So now obviously our focus is 100%. Turning the company upside down. We have to focus on the customer. So how are we going to do this? So we launched 2nd of January with the CE mark. And what we have done is we've built up over the last 18 months is very, very good customer relations with our centers of excellence, mostly focused in the UK, Germany, and Netherlands, and obviously here. So we have 15 sites that we've picked out, and these are the ones who is now testing. And what I mean by testing is the fact that we, up to now, a medical device company is not able to leave a device to be tested in a hospital. So the first time you actually can test a device is when you have a CE mark, So now, so that's now placed in these sites and being tested in anger. So we're doing it in what we call our customer friendly sites. They know us inside out. They've been part of our development in the last 18 months. So we don't feels like 18 years. So we don't feel like, we feel like we have a good relationship with them. And I think if we fall over in friendly sites as opposed to just going out, who wants this?
Absolutely. The value of relationships when piloting, incredibly important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now we're understanding, the barriers to adoption. So where are the points where we have to do a little bit more work. So that's things like, data security, good data practice, patient data, handling data, acceptance of cloud management. It's all of those kind of things that we obviously are in place through the CE mark. So cybersecurity, all of those things. That's all part of a approval process, but it's also each hospital has its own approval processes that takes time. So we're understanding this. It's not necessary that the clinician wants it tomorrow, but there's also this sales cycles within the hospitals, how you get from bringing in a device to actually getting a commercial contract. So we're not sure how long that takes. The moment these hospitals I mentioned, including Leeds, are doing our evaluation for us. So what we need from the customers as well is what it actually does to the clinical pathway. How does it change the clinical pathway? Does it save time? Time in a hospital is cost. So it's all of these trying to understand because we're not changing anything, we're adding to current care. We're not removing a CT, we're not removing an X-ray, we're not removing an MRI. We're adding to a cost in the hospital. So how do we take the surgeons with us to the C-suite and say, we really want this because? So we need the answers to the because. So that's exactly what we're doing now. So 3-4 months with these trials out. So post-market surveillance without no commercial. Yep.
A very regulatory phrase. Just getting that in there. We are doing post-market surveillance. Just in case you're listening.
You have to have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we have that in there, and I think this has been really good because obviously you build the trust within the in the customer, and it goes back to also to the integrity between the company and the customer. So that's currently where we are. I mentioned earlier the FDA as well, the Food and Drug Administration, the US compliance. So we actually today have our secondary meeting with the FDA. So that's exciting.
Excellent.
So we'll see where we are with that process today and see how far we've got. So hopefully that we, hopefully this year that we are able to go to the States as well, which is a whole another game. But otherwise, when it comes to strategy, we mentioned about this helium box with anything from orthopedics to heart to you name it, brain, robotics. The strategic thinking now in the company is to keep it so we go from customer to hollow gut. So we perhaps keep it in the gut environment. So thinking about building on the liver, so pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, and the reason behind this is the same surgical arena. It's the same buyers, it's the same clinical centers of excellence. And I think rather than us hopping from liver to brain to heart to orthopedics, I think maybe in the early days before we get in an investor, I think that we have to focus as a small company. And also we need the data. So to hop from brain to we data obviously in a company which is based on AI needs data. So we need to feed the AI models. So I think that's a strategic thinking as we stand today without an investor involved. I think that's the way to build a company. Can be wrong, but that's a 2024 model. So it's to work in that arena. So that's where we are today.
It's really interesting. I think what I like is we could have talked about the product for a long time here because the product is incredibly exciting. But it's interesting to me that actually the moat that you're sort of building behind you of, like you talked about, the identification of the barriers to adoption, you're creating your own defensibility here with everything that you're going through with cybersecurity and information governance and all these different things. Like, this is actually what health tech becomes. And I think that's the value of having someone like you come in that takes the excitement and that wild bucking horse and tames it and then fires it at something that we're going to need to do in order to get it bought and create the impact. I think that's the really interesting thing, because I mentioned this a few times here, but that there's a technology frontier, that there's people pushing technology forwards all the time, but there's an adoption frontier that lags behind of like what's actually possible to adopt, and it's that needs to be pushed forward or made easier a lot of times. And so it's the companies like by bringing someone like you in, I guess that people understand, or you understand what actually is required in order to make this happen. I really like that you're so focused on the adoption bit, and actually you understand that the best product in the world doesn't always get sold and bought just because it's the best product. There's so much that goes into that, and making it interesting and attractive, but then sticky, solve the problem, bring joy. Like all these different things are so important. And yeah, what's your inkling of you talked about you're doing this work now to figure out in those places, is it going to save time? Is it going to save cost? I like this. I like the self-awareness actually that look, we understand we're adding something in here. And actually, yes, it's incredibly important from a quality perspective. And it's obvious to see where it's important from a quality perspective, and from a perspective of reducing cognitive load of the surgeons. I imagine it's pretty damn good as well. I imagine it's good because they enjoy it and they are learning information from it, and therefore it increases the quality of the surgery. Like that, I can understand. But yeah, it's interesting that you're doing the work to figure out what the rest is. What's your inkling of the answers there? Like, where do you think the value is?
Yeah, so far, I've spoken to a lot of clinicians that you imagine to basing the surgery on these flat images on the wall. It's like when they open up a person, it's totally different to what they imagined.
What they've imagined, yeah.
So it's really around. It's a little bit. They've said the value is also to go back to something as simple as to operate or not to operate. Yeah, so that they can make a decision, a more informed decision as basic as that. Do we do it or do we not? Do we do something up front? Do we do chemotherapy to reduce, to be able to manage it better? It's those kind of it's not a decision tool, but it aids to a decision. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then the thing is that they come in these MDT, these complicated meetings where there's the most expensive meeting in a hospital, is that they come to a quicker decision. How they're going to do the surgery, that everyone is there, they're involved, that everyone's on board. It's a spatial understanding of what's going to happen when you open it up. So everyone's aligned. What they have said that they do is that they just do a quick recap. They just put the headset on, take that patient case down just before they're going into surgery, and then they feel more confident that, that was it. And then into the surgery. So that's an advantage. And they think also obviously it has to be proven, but keyhole surgery, they're able to do a little bit more keyhole surgery so that the consequences at the end is that the patient is out quicker. It's not huge open surgery where there's a huge after cost.
God, that alone, by the way, if you're converting open to laparoscopic at any sort of decent scale, that alone is a heck of a business model. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously nothing is proven as yet, but you can imagine then the cost of intensive care units and things like that, they're reduced because it's keyhole surgery. So it's in and out quicker, and obviously hopefully improves on some of the societal costs and obviously the patient's experience. Yeah. We have had some of the hospitals in Germany. They also have said from a patient consent, this is interesting, from patient consent side as well, that they can actually see that they put the headsets on themselves. It's nothing that we encourage, and it's outside of our intended use. So some places have actually put the headsets on to show the patients exactly how it looks and what they're going to do and why it's complicated. So you can imagine if there's an artery sort of going through the tumor itself, how complicated it is. Do you understand why this is complicated? And the other thing, which you'll understand a little bit more about, James, is also saving the tissue. So it's tissue sparing surgery. So you're not cutting out more than you need, which is obviously in a liver is important.
God, yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so all to be proven.
Yeah, definitely, all to be proven, and I like that. Like you know, you're out here saying we are trying to prove this, but these is anecdotally. The anecdotes matter though, and actually, for each of those, there will be examples of someone receiving that benefit that you've just said, which is great. I can definitely see it as well, where you've got tumors that are wrapping around various arteries and making it incredibly complex, seemingly. The 3D view is then obviously going to give you more confidence, and you can draw margins in 3D. That's interesting.
Yeah, the product actually does that, James. So you can actually do a resection live. So you can plan the resection, and then the software actually shows you how it would look. So you can plan it, cut it, and then it splits the liver. So you can actually see it visually as well. So that's part of the product. So you can do the resection up front. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Very nice.
Incredible. So we've talked about livers, we've talked about pediatric cardiac surgery as well. You've obviously mentioned in the box of helium balloons, there's plenty of other places this can go. What comes to mind? I know you mentioned somewhat tongue in cheek, but actually, in very real terms, following the money, because ultimately, in order to create the impact, and you need to prove it. In order to prove it, you need the biggest numbers, really, for the most amount of data, etc. And so, to go where the money is incredibly important way to get impact for however fortunate or unfortunate that is. But at the end of the day, something to come like orthopedics comes to mind, and these other areas. But yeah, I mean, what comes next for you guys, and what are you looking at?
When it comes to the company itself, we've mentioned some of the niche markets, which is obviously, thankfully, pediatric heart is a small arena. But by doing that, it would be very nice niche area that we could dominate. So that's one decision we have to make. On the other hand, if you are lucky, if you Google holographics and orthopedics, you hit on quite a lot of companies who's trying that. Obviously, they're in the preoperative space and they just focus on the bone. As an orthopedic surgeon has said many times, it's nothing. The bone is the easy part. There's nothing to do with the bone. It doesn't matter. I can make the bone in plastic. Yeah, it's everything that's around it. So it's about the muscles, the arteries, the nerves. You name it that wraps around. That's the important part. So that's where the complications start, because it is more complicated than people think. And orthopedic is the entire body. So it's from head to your toe. Is bone, and so for the data and the complications of the regulatory system kicks in. So you have to pick a place. So you either stick with a hip or a knee or something, and then it starts. Do you start with hip replacement? Hip replacement that usually involves another company, because then you need to replace the hip with something. So then you have to have the IP of the other company to be able to create the model, which is going inside the hip. So although it sounds like a very attractive market, it's quite complex. Yeah. So that's where I would like to be. The model is complex and we're trying to work it all out, but I think that's our next funding opportunity. So we will be writing a new funding for that. There is areas where we can go. We've had discussions with quite a lot of clinicians who specialize in post-accident, like facial reconstruction. So imagine having a face in a car accident.
Yes, of course.
Puzzle, trying to put it back together. So that obviously is not as much complicated with the tissue and the bone and wrapping around muscle. Obviously is there, but that's something that they want. And our current solution from start to finish to create the 3D model is now 15 minutes. The other companies take 7 days to make it, so that we could actually be, so that's an area where we could really focus as something as niche as that. Yeah. So those are the kind of things and decisions that have to make, but obviously orthopedics is the biggest area.
Beautiful.
But we're going to have to make a decision where to go.
Absolutely. You guys raising money anytime soon?
Yep, as we speak.
Always.
Yes, but I've been lucky. We've, as a company, and Soprasteria has followed since 2016. They have put a lot of money into HoloCare. Not only money, but I'm lucky that I've been working with the chair is part of Soprasteria, so she's a strategic role in Soprasteria as the chairwoman, chairperson in the company, and obviously the CFO is part of the board of Soprasteria Nordic. So that's been huge. They've dedicated a lot of time with me, for me, holding my hand through quite challenging meetings. And I think, like Paris, the owner, it's a family-owned business. So we actually, to keep this alive, the last 2 years, we actually pitched to the family in Soprasteria to keep the company running. So it's incredible journey. Now we've got the CE mark. We're in a totally other space. So they are experts in code. They're experts in designers, service designers, UX designers. That's where they're experts. And now that has stopped. So now we need to have people who actually understand healthcare strategy. So for me, I need support now moving forward of where do we go. So the question about orthopedics is a question I would like to have with a advisory board, with the board. Yeah, where we go. Yeah, because it's become a little bit. You need more people with us now.
Yes.
So now we're looking for 15 million euros, Series A round, to get us in commercial world, and obviously to start the whole build in the US. So as soon as we've got the FDA to start the reimbursement and strategic places in the US, and also to build our IP portfolio, which is obviously really important for our exit partners in 3 to 4 years.
Amazing. Alison, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much. Of course, we've worked together for a while now, and I can confirm you've been nothing but an absolute delight to work with as a person and as a company. This is cool health tech. This is proper cool health tech that everyone understands what it is and what it can do and all that sort of stuff. But what I would say is that, we actually turned down quite a lot of business at SomX for various different reasons, and similar stuff to this we've turned down in the past. And you have always been clinically focused, very practical about adoption, and basically obsessed with regulation, which in order for us to work with people, that just has to be the case. I think it's an absolute bonus that it's health tech and it's cool. But it means that for those, there's plenty of investors that listen to this. And actually, I think, as you've quite rightly identified, there are plenty of people that knock around in this space. There's a reason we work with you guys. And I, of course, am biased. I don't want to let that go by without being said. Of course, I'm biased. But I do encourage anyone that is looking for a Series A investment to get in touch with you, because we've thoroughly enjoyed working with you. So Alison, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. For those people listening that want to get in touch with you or want to learn more, what's the best way for them to do so?
Just go through the website. There's info on the website. So first of all, you can check out the website, holocare.com, and then come to us through the contact. Connect. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.